Thank you guys for being here and for doing this. Question. So when you're starting, you said you sort of start big and work your way small. When you're looking at the developmental big picture, what do you feel is sort of where most writers have a strength, whether it's plot, pace, character development, sustaining action, or world building, and where do you feel actors, most writers fall down, that they kind of have a blind spot in a certain area?
Shireen, am I answering?
Yeah, you're answering. In fact, I'm
Okay.
going to repin you because you're going to take all the questions.
Oh, okay. All right. So, obviously, every book is different and every writer is different. But a common thing that I find in writing my editorial letters is I'm always using the analogy that if you are as old as I am and you remember back in the day of Polaroids, and so things are not dimensional enough, whether it be like characters or setting. You know, so I always say that all of these elements are they just need to come into fuller sort of focus. Like everything is sort of hazy, so you should dig deeper. So I find that that's really common in both newer authors and more experienced authors. And the other thing that I find is authors get tired at the end and then they just like wrap it up in like 2 seconds. So often I think they should pay as much attention to the way that the story ends, as opposed to only how it begins.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Christina, Christina, you're up next.
Hi. Hey, Susan. Thanks for being here. My question is just, we were talking about this diversity issue, and I'm wondering how it applies to the sci-fi and fantasy markets.
I think that it applies all across the board because, as I was saying, this is sort of a thing that society is very concerned about. And so I have to say, even like, I can kind of see where you're coming from because a lot of the YA Twitter fights were about the fact that fantasy sort of was fantasy. And so, why are you bringing these issues of diversity if it's like a completely new world? I created it out of my head. I don't mean to make these elves seem dark skinned and horrible, and have these sort of stereotypes. And so I think that because, you know, what they say about science fiction and fantasy, it's never about the future or the past, it's about the now. So it's like you as the writer cannot help but have certain sort of notions that maybe come through, not, you know, because you mean to, but I think just like when you're creating different races, I think that it's just, you do have to sort of, you know, just sort of ask yourselves like why when you're creating them, like why they have certain features, and are you um, implying something negative from certain features.
Okay. Janet, you're up next.
Oh, hey. Myself. Hi. Thank you guys both for doing this. This is really great. I have a sort of a nuts and bolts question about sensitivity reads. I was wondering if you paid the Gallaudet professor, but more for the modern day, like how do you know how to compensate somebody for that, or should you compensate somebody for that? How does that work?
Yes, you should compensate somebody for that. And we did offer to pay the Gallaudet person, but she never sent her invoice. So I never got to pay her, but we did offer her money. I think that was back in the day, we offered a few $100s. But when I was, you know, the past few years, Macmillan has had a big diversity, equity, and inclusion effort, and so they had this database of like sensitivity readers that we could approach and a suggested fee that we pay them. So I think it depends on where you find that person, whether they are expecting a certain fee above a certain level, but you know, if it's a friend or somebody, you know, buy them a Starbucks card or something. It just depends on who that person
So
is.
is there like a
professional person?
Yeah, if it's a PhD or whatever, maybe I see. So that's a pretty big range, but obviously, I mean, yeah. So there's not some kind of standard, but it's
Yeah, I think
really,
there are actual, you know, if you Google it, there are sites where where sensitivity you can find sensitivity readers.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Jesse, do you want to show us your face and ask your question? Hi, Jesse.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for doing this, both of you. Appreciate your time. I was wondering, how do you think about balancing the authenticity and diversity of a piece as compared to its accessibility? Because at the end of the day, what I mean by accessibility is that at the end of the day, I guess every author wants their book to be read by as many people as possible and for them to feel like almost like the book is about them, right? Especially for first-person pieces, in a sense. So how do we balance like making something super authentic versus having it be easily understood and accessible by a wide audience?
Okay, so I think that is the hallmark of good fiction, is the universal and the specific. So, so that is what you are aiming to do by being a specific character or creating a specific character. You create them in such a way that you create empathy and realize the common humanness of everybody, and that's what the point of fiction is. And that just reminds me of there's this sort of thing that we say in children's books about windows and mirrors, so that children need books that are windows to other experiences and mirrors that reflect their experiences. And that just struck me that this is the hallmark of, as I said, the good fiction, is that if you create a character who is so like vague and non-specific and stereotyped and very sort of broad, then no one can really relate to that person. But if you create a person who is so dimensional and so specific that you can actually almost see them, like I have this weird sort of science fictional brain, so when I think of some of the characters that some authors have created, and I feel that they actually live and exist in a universe that I can't access, but I feel them living. That's how you get to common humanity,
Super helpful. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Good question, Jesse. Julie.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this. It's good to see you all. It's kind of related to that in a way. And it comes back to the whole cancel culture, people canceling themselves and canceling others, but it has to do with that lived experience. So we witnessed some authors being outed from having abusive backgrounds or having abusive relationships or other horrible things happen in their life. And they may not have personally meant to go out there in public with that, but they had shared a story that was a fictionalized account of that. So I'm wondering about where just your take on that. And I know, again, this is like that pendulum swinging back and forth that you've been describing, that the society goes this way, but I feel like we have in some ways these demands on work that is meant to be fiction, and then to cause people to have to come out and share that something happened to them personally as part of that, to justify being able to write the fiction, is something that I've had some question and challenge around. So I'm curious about your take on that.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really great point, because that's why the hashtag own voices sort of was disavowed by the creators of own voices. It was sort of a shorthand, and it was used on Twitter, so not super nuanced, but then it became like a marketing tag. And so it got into the writer community and the agent community. Everybody used that hashtag, and then people who didn't feel they were own voices got really anxious, and then the own voices people got all own voice like anxious, and then and so yes, there were a few instances where people felt they had to like either come out because they had written something and it was claimed to be own voices, but people were like, oh, we didn't know that about you. And so I think that we can sort of go overboard. I think we're all grappling to something better, and so we're going to run into these issues that are problematic. But I think that for me, it all goes back to what's on the page, the book. And I don't I don't always want to conflate the author of the book with the actual book, because even though, like Orson Scott Card is problematic in a lot of ways, I still love Ender's Game. And Ender is the character who I feel is drawn in such a way that I still love him no matter what people don't like about the author of Ender's Game. So I don't agree with that because I do think that I'm trying not to contradict myself, but I do think that sometimes we go a little bit too far, and not just like canceling ourselves and self-canceling, but I've been accused of whitewashing a cover. And so sometimes like the others, both sides go way too extreme. And I think like, even though Sharon thinks that we disagree, I think we're both sort of more sort of in the center. And I think, I don't think I'm PC or whatever. I think that's probably a dirty word, but like, and personally, like I've sort of had like issues like last year where I sort of like became more conscious of these things, and I feel like, and then like I remember being in an editorial meeting talking to like the younger editors, like, why does it matter what this race is? It's a science fiction novel. And that was like maybe 5 years ago. And so I've definitely changed and grown to sort of think deeper about these things. But I think we're all trying our best. And I don't think you should conduct your writing out of fear or anxiety. I think you focus on the work. That's always the thing. If I were still an acquisition editor, I don't really care who you are at the moment that I'm falling in love with your manuscript. I love the manuscript, and as an editor and publisher, I love the manuscript, I buy the manuscript, and then we try to sell the manuscript, and that may or may not have to do with you. But whatever, like the other thing that you don't have to worry about, I think, is that publishing, again, is about money. So if the editor and publisher think they're going to make money from your book, it does not matter who you are, they will publish you and make the money. Simon and Schuster went through these very sort of hypocritical things last year where, okay, they were not going to publish Milo, what's his face's book, but then they were going to publish Pence's book, and so they had to come up with all these reasons why they were going to publish that one's book, or they weren't going to publish this person's book. And it all comes down to money in the end. They're going to publish it if they can. And so if you write a really good book that is, that the publisher thinks it can sell, you will sell that book.
Cool. Thank you. No pressure though. Thanks.
Well, the bar just keeps getting higher, but still
the bar is getting higher, but why would you not want to be better? Like maybe it's a little bit more competitive because there's a shrinking market or whatever, but I think in the end, this is something that you can do. You have to, so publishing has always been hard. It's not going to get easier. It might get harder, but so you just have to work really hard. You have to be really good, and you have to be a little bit lucky. And it's always been the case, and it's just going to continue to be the case. I'm sorry. But, if you really love it and you have a story and you're a good writer, just keep working at it.